Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our guest speaker session at ShedFest 21. As John said, my name's Jo Phillips. I'm a shedder in Staffordshire, and I'm also a trustee of UK Men's Sheds Association, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome a gentleman that's probably already known to many of you to open our festival. His YouTube channel has thousands of avid followers. He draws in crowds from across the UK. He plays at guitar festivals, blues and Americana music festivals and gigs all across the country. And having already taught over 3,000 people face-to-face to make what he's going to show us here this morning, we're all really chuffed that the godfather of the cigar box guitar is able to share some of his secrets and tips with us this morning. So ChickenBone John, welcome to ShedFest 2021.
Good morning.
Good morning. Lovely to have you here.
Okay.
So I understand, John, you are going to talk us through the joys and wonders of cigar box guitars. Could you just kick off and give us a tiny little bit of the back history, just so we're all in the same room and understand your passion?
Okay, I mean, here's what we're talking about. It's a guitar made from a cigar box. And it plays, and I can play it a little bit. I got into these, goodness me, it must be at least 12, maybe 15 years ago. I'll have to check my records. I've always been a sort of guitar player since early teens. I was taught the violin at school, which wasn't very cool. And then I picked up the mandolin because that's the same tuning. And I made myself a mandolin when I must have been about 13 from a bit of plywood and a gatepost. And I've still got the instrument. And then I made an electric guitar at the school workshop. Those were the days when, I couldn't really afford an electric guitar. Saw one in the local music shop, and I got a catalogue. I got a Fender catalogue and picked out the nicest guitar I could find and decided to make a copy of it. And those were the days when I was, the health and safety at school. I did it in my lunch times in the woodwork shop. Basically, I was let into the woodwork shop, and the health and safety instructions were don't use the bandsaw. And that was about it. And I made myself a guitar, which I've still got, and I used that a bit later when I was in a band. When I went to college, took my guitars with me. I had a punk band called the Surprisers, and we made a record like everybody was doing in those days. It was much more difficult because it was on vinyl, and so we had to find somewhere to record it, somewhere to press it. We glued all the covers together ourselves, did our own artwork with letter set and rotary pens, and old school.
Proper old school.
Very old school. And apparently it's going to be, we reissued it on CD, but somebody has picked it up and they're going to reissue it on vinyl, on 7-inch vinyl.
Fantastic.
The record was played on John Peel, Radio 1 show, but they wouldn't play the A-side because it was too political.
That sounds one for all our old vinyl fans to bring out on the next record store day, I would say. Yeah,
it was Jeremy Thorpe is Innocent, which obviously at the time it was very controversial. Anyway, time moved on and I made a few guitars for friends and then really didn't do anything for ages. Went to college, got married, had a job, and then midlife crisis kicked in. And I thought I fancied playing in a rock band again. And my wife sort of advised me against it, that lugging all the gear up and down the steps of various pubs and that. So I started doing what I did as a lad. I went around the folk clubs with a guitar, got into blues music again, and then heard about these things through the internet, which obviously wasn't around when I was making records and the rest of it. It's so much easier these days. But there's a guy in America called Shane Spiel. And he called himself the king of the cigar box guitar because there's nobody else with the title. And there's loads of information. He dragged up old pictures and articles from, American Young Men's Mechanics newspaper or whatever, how to make a banjo out of a plank of wood and a cigar box. And I thought this was interesting because I was getting into this older sort of country and blues music where the artist didn't have expensive instruments. And it was at a time where I thought, I can go and buy myself a nice guitar now. I've never had a nice guitar. I used to go around the music shops looking at Gibsons and Martins and these, expensive. Expensive. You could buy a car for the price of one of these things. But I thought, but all these people they didn't have this sort of money. And they play old, what they call catalogue guitars, equivalent of getting something from Argos, the Sears Roebuck thing. So I managed to find some on eBay, did them up, sold them. And so I got into cheap guitars, and then I saw the Cigar Box Guitar. That's the ultimate cheap guitar, something that somebody would throw away, and it is just a stick of wood in a box.
And just for clarity, John, sorry to interrupt, just for clarity, would they traditionally then have been made from old throwaway the paper cigar boxes?
No, the wooden cigar boxes. So they're wood, and they always were. Nowadays, sometimes it's made out of like a chipboardy sort of stuff, but. Back in the late 19th century, with manufacturing coming in, it was one of these things that what was, I suppose, a luxury item became available to common people. There were 5 cents for a cigar. So it was like smoking cigarettes, really. And they'd come in these boxes. And a lot of them were, with this sort of lovely, this decorated, there's a whole commercial art came out, sort of pushing these things.
The finish of them is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, they're lovely. They're lovely things. I mean, that's a Cuban one, and that one's the natural wood. But it's a lovely piece of artwork. But yeah, they would be thrown away, and so you can make them out of anything. There, a tin can, or sometimes things like that. They had a couple of bottles of whiskey in or something. But that acts as basically the resonator, the thing that makes the sound. And so all you need is a stick to go through it and some strings. It really came from the banjo tradition, because it's always been a poor people's instrument.
Yeah.
And originally made by slaves. And they would want to, the nearest, their instrument would have been the banjo, which is the African instrument. And the tuning's very similar. This, what we call an open tuning. So it's already in a chord. It's not a Western tuning, not a Western music philosophy. So you can play it with one finger. So it's an instrument that anybody, a true folk instrument. And that's where it grew from, that tradition. So it was picked up originally by slaves and then poor white people. And you see a lot of things where you'll see, say in the First World War, in the American Civil War and the First World War, you'll see soldiers, early daguerreotypes and photographs of people with things like a violin, cigar box fiddle made out of, or a bass made out of a wash tub or a bigger box. And there's quite a few photographs. I've seen them from the Civil War. I've also got a photograph somewhere from the Boer War with somebody with a banjo and a fiddle. And then First World War, there's quite a lot of First World War music making, people just, whatever they had to hand. And quite often, there'd be a big treat being sent a box of cigars or a couple of bottles of whiskey or something in a nice box. They'd find a bit of wood, probably from propping up the sides of the trenches, and make a guitar. And it's sort of become rediscovered. And I seized upon it, made one, went down the local pub, played it. People said, "What's that?" And we went on from there.
And you've gained an incredible following over the past few years. If anybody hasn't had a look at your YouTube channel, I would urge them to, or checked you out at a gig. I know you've got a few coming up later in the year, which we'll talk about later if that's all right. But can you kick off and sort of show us the basics of how you start and put stuff together? Because I know a lot of our viewers are the making kind and would be liking to see some construction starting to go on.
Well, I mean,
Give me some tips.
A lot of people, it is a stick in a box. And really is that simple. And we start just with a stick of wood. I mean, that's a piece of plain down sapele. What's that, 22mm by 36? That's typically what we start with. I mean, we'll buy it in rough sawn and then we'll resaw it, plane it, and all the rest of it. Daily. So that's how it starts. Just a stick of wood and a box.
And a box.
If you can't find a cigar box, because they're more and more difficult to get, you can make a box. Or, you know, we actually now have these made, a plain box, and then you can decorate it yourself. So if you can't get the actual materials, like a nice cigar box, anything.
You can start with birch plywood. Am I guessing that one is?
Yeah, that one. These are made by a local firm, and they make things like, you know, the presentation case for boxes of wine and that. And we just have these made up. And what we are discovering, or what I have discovered, is that, you know, so much stuff these days is imported from China and wherever. You know, you can go into things like Alibaba and they'll knock out copies of, you know, whatever you want. But we're finding that firm is, 20 minutes away from us.
And even for the most basic of woodworker, though, which I hold my hands up, I am. You know, I think even I could possibly put together a little box like that.
This is all that is. That's a piece of is it 18 by 44 softwood.
Okay.
You get that from any DIY store. A bit of 3mm plywood, and it's just butt jointed together.
See, I might need to practice some of those, but yeah, I'm sure some of our viewers are much better than me.
If you can cut a square, if you can cut a square edge, just glue them together.
Yeah.
Put a panel pin through it. A bit of 3mm ply. Again, that's just glued and tacked on. And then we've cut that's just screwed on the top. So you just take the top out. You can just cut the notch out. A couple of saw cuts. Knock it out with a chisel. We've made a sound hole. So that's 76mm.
That's standard size, I'm presuming.
Hole cutting saw, like things that you'd fit your your low voltage lights in your kitchen light type thing. Hole drilled through for the output. I mean, we always put an electric pickup in some form. You don't have to, but yeah, that's where we started. And a lot of we do these workshops where people can come and make them. And as you said, we've done, you know, knocking on 3,000 to these. So that we have a standard box, so we know it works every time, and we'd have a job finding thousands of cigar boxes. So we make these boxes, and then you can decorate it, and we do just like self-adhesive. You know, we just print it out on the computer, repro cigar box labels, or you can put your own modern art or paint it. And then there's a stick that's got a little bit further on, and as you see, I've just got one. Yep, here we. That's the next stage.
So that's got the frets markings on it as well.
So that's our basic stick there, and we've cut that out. Do that on the bandsaw, but you can do that by hand. We've got a series on YouTube. I think it's 17 parts, and it goes through all this. But that's easy enough. You can just put a straight saw cut through to the depth, chisel it off, half round file, and you've got that. This is just taped on here, but it's what we call the back strap. That strengthens it where it goes through the body. And it's an offcut, really, of the same stuff. Just glue that together. This is a fairly fancy one because it's got a fretboard with frets. Now, you can do it without that. And that is probably the most difficult thing. And we always start people off making it without frets. It's a lot easier. A lot of people want to make it more like a guitar, but I'm saying it's a folk instrument, don't worry. But when you glue it up, it ends up like that. And as I say, it's simply, it goes right the way through. This is where it's like a banjo. And there's no complicated joints, so we just put a couple of wood screws in there. The box isn't doing any work, really. All the string tension is taken on your neck, on that stick. So you don't have to worry about complicated joints, any fancy geometry or whatever. It'll work. I say if we do it really simple, I've got see what we've got here. This is one without frets.
Okay.
We've
Just
got
while
the-
you're grabbing that, John, just to let you know, we've got some of our watchers this morning are already telling us that they already make cigar boxes in their shed.
well,
So you've got some avid fans asking for those top tips, I think, this
there's
morning.
plenty. Yeah. So here's one we did earlier, and that is just a stick. It's not got a fretboard. These markings, that's a bit of paper that that was printed on the of my just a computer printer, photocopied onto a piece of brown paper and glued on, and that basically tells you where to put your fingers. There's no fret, no metal frets. It's fretless, more like a violin, but it's also, I don't know if you can see, it's got numbers on it.
I like the play by numbers approach.
Yeah.
For us beginners.
So, when you're playing, we teach people, we don't say, oh, we got to play G and that. No, we just go, put your fingers on the number 5, number 7. So yeah, that's all you need, the numbers.
And just for clarity for our guitar playing friends as well out there, it's 3-string, not the usual 6-string.
Yeah.
What difference does that make in terms of the sound and what you can achieve from the instrument?
The reason for the 3-string, well, it's obviously easier and cheaper, but the 6-string, I'll just do a little bit of music theory here. The 6-string guitar originally would have been in an open tuning. That means you wouldn't have to put any, if you've tried to play any fretted instrument like a guitar or even a uke, you have to do these what are called chord shapes to get a nice harmonious sound. And that's a guitar, the way the guitar was originally made, and the lute was done like that. So you in an open tuning, so you had a melodious sound to start with.
Okay.
With the Renaissance and people discovering musical theory and extending it, they started making musical instrument tunings different from this natural open tuning. So you could do more complicated things, but it meant playing it was more complicated. You had to understand the mathematics involved.
Yeah.
And that's where the guitar went from really being a folk instrument to being a more complicated thing. This thing with only 3 strings has got this open tuning, and 2 of them are the same. It's an octave of, if you can hear them.
Octave higher.
Yeah. That's an octave, so it's only 1 note, and the other one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's only 2 notes, which isn't really a chord. In classical music theory, you need 3 notes. It's only got 2, but it produces what's known as a power chord, which rock musicians love. Because you get that very gritty sound. So yeah, we do them in with 3 strings, 4 strings, sometimes do 6 strings, or even 1 string.
Wow.
Which is known as a diddly bow. I mean,
diddly bow. I've never heard that name before. That's a great name.
But originally this would have been originally it would just be a piece of wire, just like a piece of baling wire or something, and nailed to the side of a shack or a door. Yeah. And you just wedge something underneath, top and bottom, to get it to, as a bridge, and then you just say hit it with a stick and slide a bottle on it to get a note. Crazy simple. So this is a bit handier than carrying round the side of a shed.
Just a little. But I'm presuming you change the tension on that will change the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what note that is. Lower note. Yeah. Higher note. So yeah, that's the diddly bow, which is the ultimate simple string.
1 string.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I did see a performer from Africa, and I can't remember his first name's Gaspar, and he plays a 1-string instrument. And that it's enormous. The neck's about 10 feet long, and it's like a big tin that he uses as a resonator, and he hits it with a drumstick and uses a bottle.
Right.
And then he has a drum So it's like this one-man band with a one-string instrument. So yeah, you can go really ultra simple, but that tuning does mean it's easy to play, and you can't, because you've not got frets, you can play it with a slide. Which again, you get completely different sound, and that's most of the instruments we make and sell and teach people is on that basis. Those three: G, D, G, and a G tuning. You don't need to know any. That's the great thing. You don't need to know any theory to play it. And at our make and play sessions, you know, we make this style of guitar, and you end up learning to play all in a day, which is like crazy when you think.
Sounds perfect. That does.
Which is crazy when
How
you
to
think.
skip years of those horrible music lessons.
Yeah, and I mean, we just started. It's just if you got at least one finger on each hand, you can play it. And we do get people who occasionally have either got difficulty with their hands or indeed are missing fingers. There's one of our clients we've had, and he doesn't have doesn't have a left hand, so he made a prosthesis that he could fix a slide to.
Brilliant.
And he'd play it on his lap. So even physically, quite severe physical limitations doesn't stop you. And because the making's so simple, it you know, I say the stick in a box, couple of holes, and pushing the thing together, all screwed together, no complicated glue joints. The making is simple and quick. We get pretty fancy with some of ours. You know, they're approaching a regular guitar in terms of the technology, which some people like. There's always people who want the best they can get, and they'll ask us, what's your best guitar? That might not be the most expensive to me. My best guitar might be something I made years ago that I just like.
And just being able to make your own instrument is a huge thing for a lot of people, isn't it? It's the achievement factor of actually playing something that you've actually put the sweat and tears into yourself.
I think making things that you can use, there's a certain joy in that.
Definitely.
And the other thing is, I think with guitars, if you go into a music shop, there's some wonderful instruments, and the price is crazy, ridiculously cheap, and the quality is very good compared to where in my day, when the most affordable thing is you go to Woolworths and they would sell guitars made in Japan. That was in the days when Japan was a synonym for cheap rubbish.
Yeah.
So that was about the cheapest you could get, and they weren't particularly good. But I
remember those back at the CD counter, hanging on the wall.
Yeah, that's it.
I was a Woolies girl many moons ago. Yeah, I remember those, but they weren't brilliant quality.
But the other thing, they are quite sought after now for that nostalgia value. Yeah. But the thing about a lot of guitars these days, they're all very similar. They're based on a couple of classic designs by the main American manufacturers, so they can tend to be a bit samey. And the great thing about when you make there is a thing in that cigar box making community. People say there are no rules. As long as it works, it doesn't matter. So people come up. I mean, we've figured this out ourselves. There's no pattern book or whatever. People fall into a way of doing it, but there's no right or wrong way of doing it. There's some stupid ways which I'd advise you not to do. But if you want to do it that way, yeah, you can.
That's up to you.
That. Yeah, but there is this joy of making something and playing something and using something that you've made with your own hands. And you do get this special connection, I think, with it, as opposed to just buying something. And it's a nice, simple thing to be able to do. It's not like thinking, oh, I'm going to go out and build myself a motorbike from scratch. It's a little bit it's an attainable thing.
Definitely. Can I ask you, John, in terms of the wood that you use, obviously you said you could use something as simple as plywood and
yes.
You know, the simple approach. If you went for a different type of wood, does it produce a different sound? Does it give you a mellower sound, or cedar wood or something like that? I'm not a wood expert, but
yeah, I understand. It probably does, but excuse me, I don't get too hung up on that.
Okay.
Which is, again, it's if you go to the ultimate, like the violin makers of like the Stradivarius and that, people are trying to discover that secret, and people say, oh, it has to be such and such a type of Sitka spruce, and it has to be from the north side of the slope, and it has to be grown in such a way, and it has to come out the tree in a certain position, and that once you've done that, you need the varnish and the glue to get the tone. We're a bit more pragmatic, and it turns out how it turns out.
Okay.
And we have found some very counterintuitive things when we like these things, which when we do our make and play days. We've made these from stuff, whatever is in stock at my local wood mills or whatever. Excuse me, but we have made them from just hardboard, which you think would sound awful, but we actually found that the hardboard ones sounded better than the plywood. It shouldn't work. We tend to make them out of a plywood. It's a bit more stable, and the hardboard does tend to bend and creep over time, so we tend to use the plywood. But there's some odd things like that where guitarists will say, oh, it's got to have a maple neck and an ebony fretboard for it to sound. It's a folk instrument, and we've made nearly 2,000 of them, and we really don't know what they're going to sound like until you get it finished, you put the strings on them and tune it up, which again is part of the fun.
Could you talk us through that bit? Could you talk us through that next bit of, once you've got your neck attached, how you would start putting your strings on? I think that would be interesting for people to see, if that's possible. Yeah,
let's see what we've got on it. Now, I mean, with this is we've done some cutouts to start taking the parts. This is for the pickup, and that will just drop in and screw into there.
Okay.
So I mean, we've got that's routed out, but it's easy enough to just drill 4 holes and cut it out with a craft knife. That's the ordinary
pillar drilled.
Yeah,
or something along those lines. Yeah,
forcing a bit or a hole cutting bit. Yeah, and then that's just cut out with a tenon saw, knocked out with a chisel, and then just glue these blocks in, so your neck runs through, and I say it screws into there. So it really is. There's no complicated joints. Let's just see if I can. This is one that's all finished up, but it's much simpler than a regular guitar, because the strings, if you can see, they just go through holes in the end.
Oh, okay. And just attach underneath.
And it just threads through a hole in there. These are little brass ferrules, but I often use pop rivets and knock the pin out, because they're like a cheese wire. It'll cut the wood. So you need a little bit of, let's say, there's a little metal ferrule in there, but we often, I think, like that one. But yeah, that's got just a pop rivet with the pin knocked out and hammered in, and the string just threads through, and that's all. That's how it's held.
Yeah.
The bridge, that's just a bit of wood. Some people use a nut and bolt if it's big enough, and then at the top end, again, where normally you probably find a piece of bone with slots cut in it for what they call the nut to go over, we don't bother with that. It's just a machine screw, because it's got grooves in it, so that'll stop the string sliding about. And we just cut that slot the same as we do for the frets, and it's about right.
Right, okay.
This is a real complicated thing to do if you're making a regular guitar. You have to cut a piece of bone, and then you have to get these incredibly thin slots in it to fit the strings, which you need special tools for. Not with this, you just cut a slot, knock it out with a chisel or a file, and that's it. And your machine heads, they're very simple. It's just a hole through here. These go through. there's a little threaded thing which clamps this machine head, the tuning screw onto there. So it's you don't need any special tools as long as you've got a drill, so that a tenon saw, excuse me, a file, and that's it. It just, this isn't glued on. It's just held on by the friction of the strings. Again, like a banjo.
Okay.
This has got a bit fancy because we've put a little bit of scrap wood on here to stop the paper getting roughed up. We've made a little scratch plate again. You can make them nice if you want them to be nice, or you can just make them really crude.
I was going to say, is there a traditional sort of finish on them? Are they varnished, lacquered? Is there a preferred way?
Has different opinions. Excuse me. I like to use just it's true oil, which is gunstock oil. Okay. If anybody makes stuff like that, or the nearest thing commonly available would probably be Danish oil. Yeah. You just rub it on with a rag, and it just goes off after a while, and you just keep putting it on, and then we just sort of buff it up with wire wool and wax. Okay. So nothing fancy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend stuff like linseed oil, unless it's like boiled linseed, because it doesn't tend to go off. It still stays tacky. I mean, the traditional finish for musical instruments is like nitrocellulose lacquer, which it's horrible stuff. It's got solvents, and you need spraying equipment. You can get the rattle can stuff from the car garage, spray that on, but I prefer this. You just rub it on. Great thing is you just rub it on with a rag. It couldn't be simpler, really. It's nice and natural.
The finish on that looks lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of sanding it down. But then once you've got a few coats on and you buff it out with a bit of triple O, quad O, wire wool and wax, and it looks nice, but it doesn't look like a factory. It doesn't look like a coffee table or whatever. Which I don't shoot for that. I like that sort of. It's a tactile thing. On the front, the fretboard, we don't put any finish on. Just a bit of oil, just neutral. We actually make our own fretboard oil, which has got like a neutral mineral oil, and then either a lemon essential oil or Atlas cedar oil, and it just and you put a bit on, and it'll clean the dirt off. And so very natural. Yeah. Sometimes we'll put a spray finish on the paper just to stop it wearing, but a lot of people go for that really worn in look, and they'll actually pre-age it to look like it came out of a barn. But the assembly bit, as I say, you can see it's held in with just like a couple of cup washers and screws. So there's no special joints. We never glue them in, because the whole thing, if something goes wrong, you can just take it apart.
I was going to say, even I think could replace a string on that as well when something goes wrong.
Yeah, I see. It just threads through, and that's it. Everybody does these things differently. I mean, we do some with fancier, more conventional bridges and that. So you can do it how you want. That other one I was playing earlier on, that's much more where I put it, not to worry. But I mean,
your workshop looks fantastic, by the way.
Well, this is sort of like our office sort of thing. I mean, the way we start, that's what we start with. I mean, it's just a piece of cherry. We just buy it in from the mill, rough sawn. Then we'll rip it, plane it, and the rest of it. Okay. We've got the gear to do it, but I'm a great advocate of hand tools, straightening necks. I've got a surface planer, but number 4 Stanley. A lot of people like to get into power tools, which are great.
Good old-fashioned hand tools are great, aren't they?
Well, the other thing is, I think you can't really use power tools unless you know. Like with wood, if you're using one of these, you know when you're going to get to a knot, or the grain's wrong. You can feel it. You bang that through an electric planer, that's when you have an accident. If you don't know what the wood's doing, and people will force the machine, and then it kicks out or whatever. And we have got, you know, the planer and the thicknesser and the bandsaw, but to get wood straight, well, I've got a few, got the bigger ones for you know, number 5 or whatever. What I'll often do, I'll actually put a straight face on with a plane, then put it through the thicknesser, because I think I do a better job by hand.
Yeah.
And I hate using the power planer. I hate them. And then the next...
John, sorry to interrupt. We've got a couple of questions that are just in, which I think relate to that. Ray's asking how difficult it is to get the intonation right when you're setting your fret lengths.
Okay.
Can you give him any top tips on that?
It's a purely mathematical thing. And with these fretboards, I mean, we actually sell them pre-slotted, that's done. But traditionally, it's done by what they call the rule of 18. You can calculate it yourself, but there are formulas online that will do it for you. You take your string length, and it's always easiest to do this in millimeters rather than feet and inches, because you get into 17/64 or whatever, which is dreadful. But basically, you take that length from the top end of to the bottom, divide that by 18, and take it off. That's your first note. Then you take that distance, divide that by 18, and keep going up the fretboard. So that gets. It's not quite accurate. That was the old-fashioned. I think they called it rule of 18. It's something like 18.14. There's a company called Stu Mack in America, and they do a little free online calculator. You just type in your string length, press the button,
work it out for you,
and it'll give you a readout. So all you need then is a good straight edge, and you just mark it. Okay. Some people do print them out off their computer, and and as we do for these, but you can never be sure how accurate your computer printer is, and the paper can stretch, or if the paper's a bit humid, so I never recommend that. So there's plenty of online resources. You can calculate it yourself, or you can buy a free pre-slotted fretboard from us, or indeed we do a lot of these. Product placement, which is we do a little jig. You can see there's a slot in there for your saw to go through, and then there's a metal template with a notch, and there's a pin in this, and you use double-sided tape to stick a fretboard on there. You saw it, move it along, click, saw the next one. So that takes all the guesswork out.
Okay, got you.
If you're doing something like that. But when you're just starting, you probably don't want all that fat. So just pencil and a ruler.
Fabulous.
That's it. And then your intonation. And the thing is, don't glue that on, because then you can tinker with that to get it in tune. If you glue that on, you might find, it's sounding a little bit flat or a bit sharp. That will just move.
Okay, got you.
Keep it simple. Again, a bit like a banjo, that.
You've got a few fans on following you today. I think Josh has already got one of your guitars and says it's taken him a while to practice, but he's got there. Good. And Chris is a fan of your rule of 18, so I think he's going to go away and check that out. Yeah,
but that's it. That is the crude way of doing it. I'd say if you actually get you can work out your own spreadsheet if you got the right number. It's 18 point something something something. And if you want a specific length, you can calculate it. But the commercial ones, I would say, are more accurate. But
brilliant.
That's it in principle.
John, we're sort of heading towards the end of our session. Okay. Would you be able to give us a little tune, and then we can have a quick chat at the end afterwards? Yeah. Would that be all right? If you got something you could one of them you could grab and play as a bit of a tune on?
Yeah, let's get a guitar. I'll plug it in. Why not?
Even better. This is where all the tech guys in the background are going to be panicking with the sound.
I don't know if you can hear that. You go.
That sounds brilliant. And you said you can put a pickup into you can put the electrics basically into any one of them. It's your choice effectively when you're making it.
Yeah, I mean that one's got like, it's a regular electric guitar pickup, but this see that one, you can't see there's not a pickup, electric guitar pickup. It's in the bridge. It's what they call a piezo. So that picks up the sound acoustically. This one has got a piezo dot. They're about 50p, and it's just like a little brass disc which is stuck in with a piece of a bit of silicone sealant underneath there. And it's got piezo electric crystals, just 2 wires onto there. It's very crude, but it works. And for 50p, you've got an electric guitar.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah,
I think you've inspired a lot of us this morning, John, to go away and start making. I really do. So, I know, obviously, we are wrapping up this session quite shortly. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. But if anybody who's on with us wants to come over and ask you some questions, just to let everybody know, we're moving over to Zoom at 11 o'clock, aren't we? So people can come and chat with you direct, and we can send some questions over direct. So if you haven't had a chance to answer everything this morning, guys, please come and do join us on Zoom shortly. But John, where can people sort of find out more about your classes and come and see you play? I know you've got some gigs and stuff lined up. Yeah. Now we're coming out of lockdown.
As per normal, if you go to Facebook, you'll find me there under ChickenBone John, and then chickenbonejohn.com. And yeah, we've got in just under a couple of weeks' time, we've got Birmingham Sandwell and Westside Jazz Festival coming up, and we're in the program there. I'm doing a few gigs. I think we're starting out in Harborne at the Hot Pole. This is before the lockdown because it's ends. It's an outdoor gig, and then we're doing places like Birmingham Rag Market, the Wellington, the Real Ale Pub in the centre of Birmingham. A few of the dates, I'll be there with a couple of harmonica players, my regular player Dave Smith, and a good friend of mine Tony Stokes. So we'll be doing, I say, a few of those, and then we are up at the Leek Americana and Blues Festival.
Yeah, I'm going to come over and say hello in person. It'll be good to meet you.
Yeah, it's beginning to open up, and also on the website, if you want to come to one of the make and play sessions, we will be running them, but we've not booked any new dates yet until we were waiting until the lockdown dates get formalized, because what we had to cancel before COVID, and what we don't want to be doing is launching more dates and then say, oh, we're going to have to put off another month. Yeah. So they will be coming up. If you're interested, go on the website and just email us. We've got a waiting list of nearly 100 people now, but we will be doing a lot more workshops. And then in October 15th and 16th, we've got the UK Cigar Box Guitar Festival, Stock, and that's in Wolverhampton. And we're going to have workshops on how to make, how to play. So we've got Friday night gig, which is a bit informal, with a good friend of mine called Hollabelly, one-man band, and Phil Billy, one-man band. And then on the Saturday, we've got a wonderful duo called the Dusk Brothers, who come up from Bristol. They make all their own stuff. They make their guitars, their amps, their percussion. They're amazing. Then we have Kevin Brown, who not specifically cigar box guitar player, is a wonderful slide guitar player. He plays a guitar made out of tin can, but he's appeared at Glastonbury way back on the Pyramid stage and learnt with classic players such as Son House. So that's another. It's going to be so cool to get these people there. And another guy called Bobster, another cigar box guitar player. So we've got lots happening at these events.
That sounds fantastic, and just lovely to be able to get everybody back out and listening to some proper live music again.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
So, no, that's really good. Would you give us one last little tune before we move over to Zoom, if that's all right?
Yeah. There we go.
And I'm presuming they're all your own tunes. Are they things that you just make up on the
That was
spot?
just
Is that
made
how
up.
you do your
That
gigs?
was an old tune called a variation on a tune called Jitterbug Swing from, it's one of my newer numbers. I think it was recorded in about 1927. But a lot of this stuff is just sort of like based on folk tunes and blues. So I'm no great songwriter, so I tend to just improvise. And I found the notes that I like, and I just hang around those a lot. I'm no virtuoso player, to be honest. And as we say, you know, I spend a lot of time here on this third fret. It's what they call the blues man's friend. You can't play anything wrong there. There you go. One fret, that's all you need.
Right. So when we've got our own newly created Cigar Box guitars, and we're going to have all these shedders across the country on Zoom trying to play together, we'll bring you back in to do some judging and checking it out, how everybody's going, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
That's brilliant. John, thank you so much for this morning. We've got the next session just about coming up, if that's okay.
Yep.
As we said, we're heading over to Zoom. But I think I've got to hand over to our next session, if that's okay. Guys, am I all right to do that?
I bought a shed, I took it home, and I erected it. I bought a shed, I took it home, I'd selected it. I bought a shed, I bought a shed, I bought a shed. I followed the instructions, studied all the plans, worked day and night to get it right with blisters on my hands. And when I put the roof on and finished off the floor, I knew inside my heart of hearts I'd be ignorant no more. I heard a no inside my shed, I suspected it. I felt a no inside my shed, I detected it. I was so scared of what he said that I rejected it. He said, forget about the tarot, the I Ching and the runes. Get down your garden centre on a Sunday afternoon. Go past the cafeteria, past all the flower beds. If you're searching for enlightenment, head straight for the sheds. And so we lived inside our shed, and we respected it. I taught him, and he taught me, and we perfected it. And all because I bought a shed.